everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. My name's Jess and today's tutorial is another Bagstock bag. Now, this one is not a free pattern. This one you gotta pay for and it's worth it, okay? This is also not a beginner level pattern. This is more of a beginner advanced-ish bag. So let's just get into it. Today's bag is the Serin bag by Bagstock Designs. And here is my version of the bag. I know. You're like, what? I was the same way. It is so stinking cute. And it is honestly the perfect size for your everyday bag. So let's just walk through the bag. First, we've got this nice long strap here, which is a crossbody strap. Let me see if I can scoot back. You can see how that hangs on me. Just, I'm 5'4", so that's how it hangs on me. You can make it much longer. You can make it much shorter with the strap. We have a twist lock on the front. Open that up. I love this bag. I really. So we've got like a nice little slip pocket right here. And then we have a zipper on the top of the main unit. And this zipper actually has a zipper tail that hangs out. Open that up. Ooh, more pockets. So we have a nice little in the seam pocket here. And then a middle pocket, which is great for like your card keys, your wallet, you know, your basics that you just want to keep zipped up. I have easy access to. So then you have two big areas of the bag. You have this side and that middle pocket just separates them like that. You can see it's got this nice gusset detail all the way around. You could even add little purse feet on here if you wanted to. I love this bag. So to be completely honest, I wasn't sure I was going to like this bag. I don't see a whole lot of people making this bag, and that's part of the reason why I chose the pattern. I like to pick patterns where people aren't making it a lot because I want to kind of find out why. I don't know why people are not making this bag. This bag is adorable. It's probably going to replace my everyday store-bought bag. This bag is such a great size, such a practical use, such a strong design. We've got these tabs on the ends, and then here's the back. We've got this beautiful stripe that goes down the front, which you don't have to include if you don't want to. So this might be kind of a longish video because there are a lot of steps in this bag. This is a more advanced video because we are going to be using a giant rivet press. We're going to be working with some thicker materials. We have a lot of pieces in this bag. Before we get started, if you haven't already subscribed, please consider clicking the subscribe link down below. If at any point you like this video, give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, leave them in the comment section down below. Every single step for this bag will have its own timestamp. So check the comments down below. There'll be one comment from me pinned to the top with all the timestamps. Just click on what part you're interested in and it's going to take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. So let's start with the materials. You're going to need half a yard of exterior fabric. This can be quilt cotton or cotton canvas or cotton lycra even. You could use vinyl or cork. Then you're also going to need a half a yard of contrasting fabric. Today I'm using this pretty vinyl that I got from My Punk Embroidery. I'll have that down in the description below. You're also going to need 1 yard of quilting cotton for the lining of the bag. For your interfacing, you're going to need 3/4 of a yard of sew-in interfacing. I like to use Annie Soft and Stable. You're going to need 2.5 yards of fusible woven interfacing. I'll be using the Pellon SF101 Shape Flex today. And then a small 11" by 10¼ piece of fusible fleece. I'll be using the Pellon Fusible Thermolam Plus. You're going to use 3 different zippers in this bag. You're going to need a 10" or longer number 3 zipper, a 7" or longer number 3 zipper, and a 14" or longer number 5 zipper. Both of the zippers on the left are from Zip It on Etsy, and this zipper that is a zipper tape I actually got from Sally Tomato. I'll have links for all of this down in the description below. Okay, for your hardware, you're going to need 2 1" D-rings, 2 1" swivel hooks, and 1 1" slider. I'm going to be using a twist lock today. I also have a zipper end, and then 8 rivets, which are size 9mm. Everything here, except for the rivets, is from Emmeline Bags. The rivets are from Cam Snaps. Because I'm using rivets today, I will be using my rivet press. I received this press from Cam Snaps and I will have links for it in the description below. In addition to those items, I will be using these tools today. First, I'll be using a 40 weight cotton thread. I get mine from Aurifil. On my sewing machine, I'm going to be using a Microtex 8012 needle. A seam ripper is going to be useful for installing snaps or the twist lock. I have two different types of marking tools. I like to use the chalk on the darker fabric and the pen on the lighter fabric or areas where I can mark in the seam. I'm also going to be using a 1/4 inch double-sided tape. I'm going to use a large pair of scissors and a small pair of scissors, my thread snips, and a small pair of pliers for help with installing the twist lock. So all of the pattern pieces will be on pages 24 through 29. Page 23 is actually just an example of how to attach two different pieces of one pattern piece, but that's not an actual pattern piece. So you're going to print off at 100% pages 24 through 29. On page 30, she actually has this great grid that you can use as your labels for keeping all of your fabric together. You'll see we have a lot of different pieces of fabric to cut out, and it can get confusing what is what, and that grid is actually incredibly helpful. So as you can see, what I did was I cut out each one of the blocks from that grid, and then I pinned it to my pieces of fabric and interfacing as I cut them. This is going to make piecing the bag much, much easier. So let's go through all these pieces. First, you're going to have your main zipper closure. Now these are going to be what hold the zipper on the main part of the bag in place. You're going to need 4 cuts of these and 4 cuts of the woven interfacing. You'll see that the woven interfacing is actually a smaller size than the fabric. You're going to have a bit of an overhang with your fabric. That is intended. Next, you're going to have your zipper tab, which is 2 cuts of your exterior fabric. You're going to have a flap center stripe, which is 1 cut of the contrasting fabric. If you're using quilt cotton, you're going to want to make sure you interface this with SF101. Since I'm using vinyl, I don't need to interface it. You can also just bypass this step. You can see in my finish bag that this is the center stripe unit right here. If you had a print or maybe a panel that you really wanted to showcase on this flap, you could just skip the stripe and just keep this a plain fabric panel. Next, you're going to need 2 cuts of your contrasting fabric. This is going to be your strap. Again, I'll be using vinyl, so I'm not interfacing this, but if you were, you would want to interface this with the cut of SF101. The next piece is the gusset panel. This is what's going to go around the bottom and the sides of the bag. You're going to need 1 cut of your contrasting fabric and woven interfacing if you're using cotton for your contrast, and then also a cut of the foam interfacing. Following that is the lining gusset panels. You're going to need 1 cut of lining. You're going to use the template to create 1 cut from the lining fabric, but then you're going to also create a second cut as a mirrored. So you're just going to flip over your template and then trace it in the mirrored angle. So you should have 2 cuts, but they are not identical. You're going to have 2 cuts of exterior fabric that are interfaced with the SF101. These are going to be the side connectors on the side of your bag. Next are your interior divider panels. These are what are going to create those nice middle pocket in the middle of your bag. You're going to need 2 cuts of exterior and 2 cuts of lining. All of it needs to be interfaced with your woven interfacing. Here we have the exterior slip pocket. This is going to be the pocket on the exterior part of your bag. You're going to use 1 cut of exterior, 1 cut of lining, both interfaced with your woven interfacing. This is your interior zipper pocket panel. This is going to be the recessed pocket on the inside of your bag. You're going to have 2 cuts of lining, both interfaced with SF101. Following that, you have your exterior bag top panel. This is going to be the top of the back of the bag. Your top panel is going to be exterior fabric that is interfaced with your woven interfacing. You're also going to have a cut of foam that is a bit smaller. You'll see on the pattern piece, this whole unit is the piece for the exterior fabric, but when you're cutting the foam, you actually just fold down on that dashed line and cut your foam at a smaller size. Next, you're going to have the bottom of your back panel. You're going to have 1 cut of exterior fabric that is interfaced with woven interfacing, and then you're going to have a shorter piece of foam. You can see this works the same way as the top, where you're going to use the whole pattern to cut the exterior, fold over the top, and create a smaller unit with the foam. Next up is your exterior front panel. You're going to have an exterior cut lined with woven interfacing, and you're going to have 2 lining cuts also lined with your woven interfacing. You're also going to have a foam interfacing cut of this pattern. And last is the flap. This is what goes over the bag. Make sure if you have a directional print, you're cutting it in the right direction for the exterior and for the lining. The exterior and lining will both be interfaced with woven interfacing, and the exterior will also be lined with fusible fleece. So now let's just quickly go over how to attach the interfacing. All of your cotton pieces need to be interfaced with woven interfacing except your zipper tabs. When attaching the foam to the exterior back top panel, the foam needs to be attached to the top of the back panel, but there should be a gap on the bottom. So your foam interfacing should be like this. You're gonna attach this on using a basting stitch, which is about 3.5 millimeters, and you're gonna attach it on at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, just like this, just along the 3 edges. You're going to do the same thing for the exterior back bottom panel. Your foam this time will be attached to the bottom of the panel, and there will be a gap on the top. You're gonna attach this on again with a basting stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. For your exterior flap, you're first going to interface it with the woven interfacing on the back, and then on top of that, on the back, you're going to add on the fusible fleece. Your exterior front panel will be interfaced with your woven interfacing, and then you're going to go ahead and attach your foam around all of the edges using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and a basting stitch. You're going to do the same thing with the gusset panel, where the foam is the same size as the gusset. Attach it to all of the edges using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You'll notice for your main zipper closure, you'll have an interface size and a fabric size. You're going to only apply the interfacing along one edge for all 4 pieces. So all 4 of your units should have a good amount of space along one long edge of the fabric. All right, let's start with the flap center stripe. You're going to grab your flap center stripe panel and you're going to draw a line along the midway point of this panel. Now you're going to take the longer edges and fold them up to meet that midpoint line. You can use clips to hold that in place, or you can use this double-sided tape and just lay it close to the line. Cut like 2 strips on either side of your line. Pull off the paper and then fold your vinyl to meet that line and press down. There you go. Do the same for the other side. So now you have a center stripe that should look just like this, with the crease in the middle and nice and flat on the back. Now grab your exterior flap and we're going to go ahead and mark a center line down the middle. You can fold this in half, or you can grab your pattern piece and line it up with one side. Use any sort of marking tool because this will be covered up by the stripe. So if you have a lighter fabric, you can definitely use your friction pen here. Mark a line down the center, and then you're just going to line this up and center it over it just like that. What I do is I actually look for the midpoint of my vinyl and I line that up with the line on the top, clip it in place. Do the same for the bottom. Line it up and clip it in place. You can use tape here if you want to tape this down. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along all 4 edges of our stripe. We're going to use a 3 millimeter stitch length and an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now let's grab your lining flap panel and pin that right sides together with your exterior flap panel. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to use a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to sew along all of the curved edges, leaving the top edge completely unsewn. So now we can go ahead and trim the seam allowance down to 1/4 of an inch. Go ahead and flip out your flap so that it's right side out. To help with top stitching, you can go ahead and give your flap a nice press. This will just smooth everything out so when we're at the machine it's easier to top stitch. If you're using a very thick vinyl, you might notice that right here around the stripe, it wants to keep rolling the lining side up. Just push that down as best you can with your fingers and pin it or clip it in place just like that. That'll help keep it down until you top stitch. Then I go ahead and just add a few more clips around the whole flap. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch around all of the edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you've top stitched your flap, you can go ahead and set that to the side. Okay, grab your exterior slip pocket panel, and now we're gonna install the male end of our lock. Flip it to the wrong side up and find the midpoint. You can go ahead and just fold this in half like this and mark a line on the bottom. Grab a ruler and we're gonna mark 5 inches from the bottom edge. The bottom edge is the curved edge. So I can just mark like this. You can also mark a line going straight to that, just like that. So we're going to be installing this unit on the panel. So you're going to make sure you know how you want these lined up, and then use your backing piece to mark a couple of lines so we know where to cut the slits. So I can just check this to see which slits it goes into. I'm going to line up my circle with the intersection of my 2 lines and make this as straight as possible and mark lines for my prongs. Use your seam ripper to go ahead and just cut slits in the fabric right along those lines. Go nice and gentle so that you don't cut too much. On the right side, go ahead and insert your twist lock male unit into those slits. So it should look like this. If you have a piece of stronger interfacing, go ahead and grab a little cut of that off and mark the same prong holes on it and cut the same slits. This is just going to give your twist lock something a little bit stronger to hold on to besides just this fabric. There we go. And then just insert that over the prongs. Now grab your washer and put that down over your prongs. So you should now have your twist lock, your fabric, your stabilizer, and your washer. Now we need to just push down these prongs over that washer. I found these prongs to be very strong and difficult to push down. So these are wire cutters, but they work well as pliers as well. So I'm just going to use these to kind of help me push them down. There we go. Now you can grab a scrap piece of fusible fleece and just fuse that over the back of this. What you can do is just put your scrap piece of fusible fleece over it, lay it right side up, and just fuse around your lock. All right, now grab the exterior slip pocket lining piece and lay that right side down against the exterior piece. We want all 4 sides to line up, but we're going to be sewing along the top straight edge. So now we're going to go to the machine and sew along this straight edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have it stitched, we can go ahead and press these panels wrong sides together. I like to give it a little press on the top first, flip it out, press it, and then flip it down. You want to make sure all of your edges match up really well. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along that flat edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. You're going to go ahead and baste the rest of the edges together at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now grab your exterior front panel, and this should have the foam interfacing on it, and match the exterior slip pocket along the bottom edges. So it should just snug in on the bottom just like that. Go ahead and clip these in place. So now we're going to go ahead and just sew along the entire curved edge of both these panels together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, now let's build the exterior back panel. Go ahead and grab your exterior back panel bottom panel and lay it right side up. Grab your flap, which should be finished, and you're gonna lay your flap exterior side down, so the stripe should be pointing down. Now we're gonna line it up with this top edge, and it should be centered. You can eyeball, but really it just needs to be about 1 inch in from each edge of the exterior bottom back panel. Go ahead and clip these in place. Now we're going to go ahead and baste this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so this is where you should be. You have your flap attached to the bottom back panel. Now take your exterior back top panel and lay it right side down so the edge that doesn't have the foam attached is lining up perfectly with the top of your bottom back panel, and pin this in place. So this should be what you have now. You have your bottom back panel, your flap, and your top back panel all sandwiched together just like this. So now we're going to sew along this edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure that we catch about 1/8 inch of this foam that's on the top back panel in our stitches. 1/2 inch seam allowance, 1/8 inch into our foam. So now you're going to go ahead and flip all of the top back panel and the flap up just like this. Your seam needs to be pushed against the bottom back panel, and it will naturally want to go against that bottom back panel because you have so many layers on the top. It doesn't want to go against the top layers, so you shouldn't have a hard time getting it to lay against the bottom back panel. So now we're going to go ahead and top stitch along the bottom back panel 1/8 inch away from this seam. So the stitching will be on the bottom back panel. What we want to do is we want to catch the seam. We also want to catch some of the foam if your foam wasn't already included in your previous stitches on the top back panel. All right, so your exterior of your bag should be complete. Go ahead and set that to the side. So now we're going to build the connectors for the bag. Go ahead and grab your 2 connector pieces and lay them right side down. Mark a line along the middle of each connector. Now we're going to fold the long edges up to meet that line that we marked and press. Do the same with the top to meet the middle. Give it a good press. And do the same with the other connector. Now you can go ahead and clip this just a little bit if it makes it easier to keep the seams down. All right, now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along both of the long edges of our connectors using 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to be using the D-rings. Fold your connector in half, just like that. And you can go ahead and mark a line on that halfway mark on the back of the connector. Fold one end to meet that halfway mark. And give it a clip to hold in place. Grab your D-ring and fold that over the flap so that the straight edge is along the back of the connector. And then fold the other end of your connector down to meet that midpoint mark and clip. There you go. So you should have something like this. The back of the connector has the seams met, the front has no seams, nice and clean. Do the same for the other connector. So now grab your exterior gusset panel and we're going to attach our connectors to this gusset. So we want to attach our connectors so that the very top of the fold is 1.5 inches down from the top edge of the gusset and centered. Now I just eyeball it to center it. To assist with this, grab your double-sided tape, cut off a small piece, push it down nice and firm on your connector. So I just eyeball where the center is and then push my connector down. Remove your clips. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew around our connector at 1/8 inch seam allowance and just going right up against that D-ring, obviously not going over it. I do suggest switching to a zipper foot for this portion. Now when I'm attaching my D-rings, I like to first just make one line with good back stitching right along the edge of the D-ring. Now I'll start at the bottom edge of the D-ring and go across the corner and then up, following the stitches from my top stitching of the connectors. And I'll just go as high as I can, trying to get up to that stitch right next to my D-ring. Give it a good back stitch and then cut off. Now I'll go to that last edge that hasn't been stitched and just follow my previous top stitchings for the connector. And that's how I attach one side of the connector. Let's go ahead and repeat this process for the other connector. If it helps, you can go ahead and tape down these inside folds just like this. Depending on your fabric, the tape might not work that great. When I'm using quilt cotton, it seems to work pretty well and it really likes sticking to vinyl. But this canvas, it doesn't want to stick to. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a center strip down the back to help hold it to the vinyl. All right, and once again, we're going 1.5 inches down from the end that does not have a connector yet. And the top should match up with that, and then just eyeball it and center it. So now take this to the sewing machine, and once again, let's stitch this on. All right, now let's add some rivets to this. To line up my rivets, I just grab the ends of the rivets that don't have the prong sticking out, and I just kind of eyeball it. She gives you measurements of where these should go, but honestly, eyeballing it is fine. So I know I want one right here, and then I'll put the other one centered right beneath it. So I just push down to kind of get a dent in the fabric. You can go ahead and use a pen to mark a hole where you want it. Now let's grab our rivet press, and the first tool I have on here is a hole punch, and that's going to allow me to punch a hole exactly where I want to put my rivet. Now I have this lovely hole for my rivet. I'm going to do the same for my other spot where I want my rivet. I just line up the tip of the hole punch with my mark and push down. Okay. So now I have both of my holes for my rivets. Take one of your male end rivets and stick it through the hole. Grab a female end and just snap it over there. Now, make sure you change your dies. Currently I have a die in to cut holes. And I am using medium-sized rivets, which is about a 9mm by 8mm. So just make sure you have the right size dies. When I'm not sure which size to use, I just kind of lay it in there, and if it seems to fit well, that's the die I use. I am not a rivet professional here. Just want to make things look pretty. All right, so then lay your rivets in the dies. Make sure they're lined up before you push down, and there we go. I know that the rivet press and this whole setup is kind of an expensive investment, but I have to be honest, I am so glad that I made it, because this just, I mean, look at this. It takes your bags to the next level. You can use Chicago screws for this. You can skip it entirely. You don't have to add rivets at all. You can just leave it with the top stitching. But these rivets just make your bag look so professional, and I love it. All right, let's do the same with the other side. There we go. Now we have our gusset complete with the side straps attached. Okay, so now we're going to work on finishing the entire exterior of the bag. So you're going to want to go and clip the edges of both of your exterior outer curved panels. So this is your exterior panel with the slip pocket and the attachment for the hook. Clip the corners here. With the flap, also clip the corners. So you can just make little V's that go about halfway into the seam allowance, just like this. Clipping these corners is just going to make it a lot easier for you to sew on that gusset, since we are going to be sewing a pretty large curved edge. There you go. So you should have something like that. You can go ahead and add a couple extra just little snips along the other curves if it helps. Now do the same for the other panel. This will be the panel with the flap on it. All right, so now we want to mark the centers of all of our curved panels. So you can just take your panel and fold it in half and just make sure the edges are lined up, and take a marking tool like a pen and just give it a good mark. That way you know where the midpoint is. Do the same for the other outer panel. And now we're going to do the same thing with the gusset. Take it, fold it in half, whichever way is easiest. And mark both sides of your gusset. You'll be attaching these panels to both sides of the gusset. Now we have all of our midpoints marked. Now let's start with the front panel, and we're going to lay our gusset right side down against the front panel, matching those midpoint marks. So the bottom of your gusset midpoint mark should match up with the midpoint mark on the bottom of your front panel. Go ahead and pin the middle. Now take the top outer edge of your gusset and line that up with the top edge of your front panel, and do the same with the other side, the outer edge, just like that. And now what you want to do is just pin along the entire curve. These slits in your curve on the other side should allow your outer panel to kind of bend the way you need it to. So you see whenever I'm here, I just kind of push it down, and those slits allow the panel to kind of spread out a little bit more. Do the same for the other side. I like to start at the top and work my way down to the middle of the bottom of the bag. So this should be what you have right now. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So it's easiest if you have your gusset panel side up and the outer panel side down. So I will tell you, you can start at the bottom middle of your gusset panel instead of at the top to prevent the whole gusset from being shifted around too much. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, standard stitch length. I'm going to start in the middle this time, and I'm going to give it a good back stitch at the beginning and the end. Just go nice and slow, take your time. I like to have a small pair of scissors nearby in case I need to make little slits in the gusset panel to help it spread out. All right, when we get to the corners, I'll show you that. So you can see right here, my gusset is trying to pucker a bit, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a clip. Same thing here, give it another clip. So you can see when I'm doing my gusset, it does push it up just a bit, which is why I like to start in the middle. And now I'm gonna do the opposite side the same way. Make sure you backstitch it really well. So this should be what you have right now. You can see that my gusset did get pushed up just a little bit on the sides. I'm not terribly concerned about that. What we want to do before we sew on the other side is trim this down to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So just trim half of your seam allowance off. All right, now we're going to do the same thing with the top panel. So you're going to lay them right sides together, line up the midpoints just like that, and then line up the ends. And then line up the edges. All right, now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew this on the same way. Once again, we want the gusset side to be up. I'm gonna start in the middle, just like I did on the other side. Make sure you give it a good back stitch and just go nice and slow around the edges. gonna make sure you don't get the flap in that seam. You shouldn't, but just to be careful, you can go ahead and push it out of the way a little bit. Now let's do the same with the other side. If you're doing the middle like I am, that means you kind of have to bunch up your bag on the other side of the needle. And of course, you don't need to do it this way. You can start at one end and go down around. All right, this is where you should be. This is your bag. You can go ahead and turn this right side out. You worked hard. You should get a little sneak peek of what your bag's gonna look like. Oh yeah, that's cute. So this is an idea of how it's gonna look in the end. And that is such a stinking cute bag, right? Oh, I love this bag. Okay, so now we're gonna work on adding the interior zipper pocket in one of the lining panels. For this, you're gonna need your interior zipper pocket panels in just one of your lining main panels. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna fold 1/4 inch of the bottom edge of each pocket, wrong sides together. And this is going to be helpful later when we have to close this up. To help you do this, go ahead and go on the bottom long edge of your pocket and mark 1/2 inch line. This is on the wrong side of your fabric. Do this for both of your pocket panels. Now we're just gonna fold the long edge up to that marked line and press. Do the same for the other pocket panel. Now set these to the side for just a moment. Grab your lining panel and face it right side down. Go ahead and fold it together so you can find the midpoint mark on the top straight edge of your lining panel. And now we're gonna mark a line that is 2 inches down from the straight edge of your lining panel. Just go ahead and mark a line just like that. So what we want to create is a 7-inch wide by 3/8 of an inch tall rectangle. So you can go ahead and mark your 3/8 of an inch line, just using that previous line you marked. Now we know to make 7-inch wide pocket, we need to go 3.5 inches on both sides of our midpoint mark. So just take your ruler and line it up with the 3.5 inch line on that middle and draw a line for your rectangle. Do the same on the other end. So now this rectangle should measure 7 inches long by 3/8 of an inch tall. You can mark a midline, which is going to be between 1 and 2/8 of an inch. So I just line the bottom up with the space between those 1/8 marks, and then just make yourself a little V on each side. It doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. Now flip your lining panel right side up. You can carry over that midpoint mark to the front. Just make sure it will stay in the seam allowance. Take your ruler and measure 1 inch down from that top straight edge. Take one of your lining pocket panels and lay it right side down with the pressed edge on the bottom. And you can go ahead and find the midpoint of this as well, just so we have everything perfectly centered. There we go. Now line up that midpoint mark with the midpoint mark on the lining panel, just like that, and just kind of press it up against the ruler. So that should have your pocket panel exactly where it needs to go for the recess pocket. Go ahead and grab some pins and pin the pocket panel to the lining panel. So there we go. Now you should flip it back over, and we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along our outer rectangle using a standard 2.5mm stitch length all along the 4 edges. Go ahead and remove your pins, and now we're going to cut along that center line in our rectangle. Make sure you don't cut any of your stitches. And then you're going to also cut along the V's that you marked. And you're going to cut right up into the corner of your stitches, but don't cut your stitches. But you get so incredibly close, you feel like you're about to cut them. But don't cut your stitches. Cut the other side as well. Now we're going to push the pocket panel through that hole. And you're going to grab your iron and we're going to press this down so it's nice and easy to work with. So first you can just kind of pull your pocket out, roll the seam a little bit. If you've clipped close enough to your corners, you shouldn't have any bunching on the edges. I'm going to go ahead and press this area. So now your lining panel should look like this. We're going to add the zipper now. Go ahead and grab your zipper and your double-sided tape and just tape the very outer edges of your zipper. Try to keep the tape as far away from the zipper prongs as possible so that way the tape won't show through the pocket. You can do both edges. All right, so go ahead and remove the paper from your tape. Now I like to keep my zipper right side up, and then I just lay my lining panel right side up over it until I have it just the way I want, and then gently push down on that tape. Once you have it the way you want, make sure you pull back a little bit and get that zipper in your rectangle. All right, so this should be what you have. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along this entire rectangle at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, you should now have your zipper installed. If your zipper was a little bit long, you can go ahead and trim it. Now turn your lining panel right side down and grab your other zipper panel. Lay your other zipper panel right side down against the right side of the zipper panel that's attached to the bag, and then just clip the two panels together. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the 3 edges that are clipped at 1/4 inch seam allowance. The bottom edge that has the 1/4 inch fold, you're going to leave that unsewn. We're just going to do all 3 of these edges. Make sure you give yourself a good back stitch at the beginning and the end of this. As you're sewing this, make sure you move your lining panel out of the way. We're not sewing the pockets to the lining panel. So what you can actually do is just sew it from the lining panel side up, just like this. That'll make it easier for you to keep your lining panel out of the way. Remember, we're doing 1/4 inch seam allowance here. All right, so your lining panel with the zipper is good to go. Go ahead and put that to the side for now. Now grab your 10-inch zipper and trim it down so it measures exactly 9 1/4 inch. You'll probably have one end that doesn't have a stop on it. Go ahead and take that to your sewing machine and just run over the very edge of it a couple times. Now go ahead and grab your zipper tabs and lay them wrong side down. And mark a line along the center of your zipper tabs. Grab your iron and go ahead and press the long edges of your zipper tab up to meet that center line. Press the other side to meet as well. Now you can go ahead and fold these in half again and just clip them to hold them together for now. Now grab the zipper that you trimmed down and we're just going to sandwich the ends of the zipper into our zipper tabs. So just push it in just like that and clip the zipper tabs onto the zipper. Do the same for both sides. Now we're just going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the inner edges of our zipper tabs on the zipper tabs at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have your zipper tabs attached to your zipper, you can go ahead and trim them down so that they're the same width as your zipper. Now you're going to grab your interior divider panels. She refers to this as the exterior divider pocket panel. It's the same thing. It's the exterior fabric for the interior divider panel. Go ahead and grab the exterior and lay it right side up. Grab your zipper and lay your zipper right side down. Now you're going to lay your zipper along the top edge of this panel and centered. It's about 3/4 of an inch in on each side. Go ahead and clip this zipper in place. All right, now let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew the zipper on at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now grab one of your lining panels for the interior divider panel and lay it right side down against the right side of your exterior panel. You should have the zipper sandwiched in between and just pin along the top straight edge. All right, now flip this over so you can see the stitches that you just made. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go over these stitches again, but this time we're gonna be including the lining panel in on it. All right, once we have the zipper sandwiched in between the exterior and the lining, we're gonna go ahead and press that top seam so that we have the panels wrong sides together and the zipper with the zipper head on the exterior side. All right, now we can go ahead and top stitch along this straight edge by the zipper. We're gonna use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then while you're at it, go ahead and baste the curved edges of the panels together at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have one attached, you're gonna do the same for the other side. So grab your other exterior divider panel and lay that right side down against the zipper. You can just flip the whole unit over if it's easier. And you're going to line up your zipper with the top edge. I find it easiest just to make sure the edges of my other panels are lined up well here, and then just pin that top edge to your zipper. All right, now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew along this pinned edge at a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that exterior panel on, go ahead and grab your other lining divider panel and lay it right side down against the other lining panel, but lined up with the top edge that you just sewed, and clip it in place. All right, and then again, just flip this over and we're just gonna go right over those previous stitches. And now let's go ahead and press these panels away from each other so that they end up wrong sides together, just like that. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just along the edge of the zipper that we haven't sewn on yet. And while you're here, you can just go ahead and baste stitch the other edges of your panel together at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you should now have a unit that looks just like this. Go ahead and match the top folded edges and just pin them together just like that on both sides. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew from the top all the way around the bottom up to the top, sewing all of the 4 units together, creating a pocket in between our panels with our zipper. So you can clip these together if that helps. We'll be using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now we're gonna attach the gusset onto this pocket panel. So first what you wanna do is clip some little V's on the rounded edges of your pocket panels. Okay, so now go ahead and mark the center of your panel, just like this. I'm gonna use chalk here since it's a darker fabric. And then mark the centers of your lining gusset panels as well. Okay, there we go. And you'll notice that your gusset panels have a straight side and a rounded side. You wanna work with the straight side here. So the straight edge of your gusset panel is going to go right side down, match up with the midpoint of your divider panel, and then clip that in place. Now this time our gussets are going to extend farther up than our divider panel. So what you wanna do is just clip around the edge just like this. She suggests clipping the gusset panel here as well to help you clip this whole thing in place. You can do that now, or you can wait till we get them to the machine and just clip the gusset as we go around these edges, and I'll show you how to do that. Oh, do the same for the other side. All right, so now we're gonna sew this gusset panel on at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I like to start in the middle on the bottom and work my way up one side and then go around the other side as well, because the gusset does shift as it's moving. This helps me keep the edges the same length. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna start in the middle and we're doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning. And as you come to the corners, you can go ahead and just use some small pairs of scissors and just clip it as you feel the gusset tugging on you. All right, you should have one on. If you find it pulling up a lot, you can give your gusset some more clips just to keep it laying down. All right, now let's do the other side. Same thing, start in the middle. All right, so once you have one gusset sewn on, flip it over and we're gonna attach the other gusset the same way. Make sure you find which edge is your flat edge of your gusset lining panel and attach that to the middle using your marked midpoints, just like that. Pin it in place and then just pin it all the way up the edge. This is one of the more challenging parts. Towards the top of the gussets, you want this to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Towards the bottom, you want it to be a 5/8 inch of a seam allowance. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on the bottom again in the middle, and I'm just gonna go up one side at a time. I'm gonna start at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Once I get past the curve, I'm gonna go ahead and shorten my seam allowance to a 1/2 inch all the way to the top. I'm gonna do this on both sides. The hard thing here is making sure that this gusset panel doesn't get sewn and pleated on the back. So you're gonna have to keep a close eye on the underside of your panels just to make sure that this doesn't get sewn into any of the seams. Check the back, make sure you didn't accidentally get a big chunk in there. All right, now let's do the other side. Now we can go ahead and trim down the seam allowance on the gussets to a 1/4 inch all the way around. Now we're going to attach the other lining panels to this gusset. So grab both of your lining panels, one should have a pocket in it, and let's mark the midpoints on the curved bottom edge. Now to help us attach the gusset, go ahead and clip some just little V's again on these curved edges of your lining panels. I find too with the thinner lining panels, just some slit cuts actually work just fine. I don't really need the V's. The V's work better for the thicker fabric, but for this thinner panels, V's seem to be a little more than we need. So grab your lining panel with the zipper and line it up right sides with your gusset panel, matching up your midpoint marks, just like that. And now pin those together. Now match up the top corners of your gusset and your lining panel, and then just go along the edge and clip the curved edges together. Do the same for the opposite corner. So you want to make sure that your zipper pulls will close on the same side. This just makes the bag a little bit more functional. It's not a big requirement. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along our clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you sew with the gusset side up, and I again like to start in the middle and work my way up to the sides. Go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. Now go ahead and trim that seam that you just sewed down to a 1/4 inch, so just half of the seam allowance. So this should be what you have now. You have your divider pocket, you have one of your lining panels attached to the gusset, and then you have your other gusset here waiting for the last lining panel. So we're just going to repeat that same process, attaching the other lining panel. Lay it right side down, right side with your gusset, line up those midpoint marks, and clip the middle, go to the top, clip the top corner, clip the other top corner, and then just clip along the edge. All right, once again, go ahead and sew along your clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, I'm going to start in the middle with the gusset side up. So the inside of your bag is pretty much done now. It should look just like this, where you have your 2 side open areas and your pocket in the middle and the pocket on the side. Now let's work on the main zipper closure. This step is optional, so if you don't need a zipper on the top of your bag, you just want to use the flap, you can go ahead and skip this step. So I have about 15 inches of zipper tape here. I'm just going to go ahead and add my zipper pull on. I usually just slide one side in like that. And then I slide the other side in, try to nestle the prongs, and then I just hold it down and pull like that. So now I have my zipper on here. Now figure out which side is going to be the opening of your zipper, so you can see this side will be the opening. So I'm just going to open it up like that. And what we want to do is we want to fold down these ends. Now she has a method for doing this in her instructions. I'm just going to fold them down like this, at about a 45-degree angle, and clip for now. Since I have these prongs here, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me to use her method. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch down this fold over so that I don't have to worry about it coming undone. Now grab your main zipper closure pieces, you should have 4, and grab your zipper tape with the ends sewn down. So take one of your zipper panels and lay it right side up with the interfacing on the top. Take your zipper right side up and lay it so that it is about 3/8 of an inch in from the edge. So you can go ahead and mark that. And the folded edge of the top of your zipper tape should be at that 3/8 of an inch mark. And then just pin this onto the zipper panel. So what you want to do is sew your zipper on 3/8 of an inch in from each side. So I know that I'm 3/8 inch from the end of this zipper panel, and I'm going to mark the same on my zipper tape. So I'm just going to sew along the zipper at a 1/4 inch seam allowance until I am 3/8 of an inch away from each edge of my zipper tab. So once you have the zipper attached to one of the panels, grab another panel, and again with the interfacing on the top, lay it right side down against the other panel that you've sewn on. Pin it in place, just like this. Your zipper should be halfway in the middle. Be careful if you don't have anything on the end of your zipper. You don't want your zipper to go flying off. So what you're going to do is you're going to sew along the short edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then sew along the top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, stopping 3/8 of an inch in from the end of your zipper tab. So you can go ahead and mark that again if you'd like. So it's a 3/8 inch seam allowance along this side, along the top of the zipper, and then stop at the end. Make sure your other zipper piece is out of the way. Once you have this attached, you can go ahead and trim the short edge corner down to a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If you have any zipper tape hanging over the edge, trim that off as well. Now you're going to turn this right side out. So you should now have something that looks like this. Now we're going to go ahead and give this a press before we top stitch. So first, give the fabric by the zipper tape a good press and give that folded edge a good press. Now the raw edge that you have here on the end, you're going to fold that in on itself so that it's wrong sides together, and just kind of tuck it in like that. I find using clips is helpful. And then do the same for the back panel. So now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch along this entire lining rectangle, making sure we have these folded edges in place. This long edge will remain raw, and then we'll also top stitch next to the zipper. All right, now we're just going to repeat that process for the other side. So lay your zipper closer right side up so that the interfacing is on the top, and then make sure the edge of your zipper is 3/8 of an inch in from the edge of the zipper closure. All right, let's take this to the sewing machine and sew this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to leave 3/8 of an inch on the end of your zipper enclosure unsewn. So now grab your last zipper closure, and again with the interfacing side up, place it right sides together with your other closure that you just stitched on and clip it in place. Make sure you get those ends in there. You can unzip your zipper to keep the other zipper closure out of the way. So now we're going to sew along the short edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then sew along the long edge by the zipper at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you stop 3/8 of an inch from the edge of your zipper enclosure. All right, now go ahead and trim down that short edge to a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And you can trim off any extra zipper tape you might have. And we're going to press this again. So flip it right side out. And when you close your zipper, it should look something like this. Now go ahead and just give it a good press. Now you can take your short raw edges and fold those in on themselves. And you can press them or you can just clip them. So I just do one at a time. One and then the other. I'm just gonna add these to the other clips. Already there, there we go. And if it helps, you can go ahead and clip along these raw edges as well, since we're gonna be sewing it all together. All right, now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to just top stitch along this entire rectangle at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now measure 3.5 inches from the end of your zipper enclosures and just trim off your zipper tape. Now we're going to attach this little zipper end. You can just go ahead and fold down your zipper tape on itself just like this. create a nice point. I'm just gonna clip that. Grab your zipper end pull and make sure you have one of your screws. Grab some glue, I'm using Gutermann, and just kind of squeeze some glue into the end of your little zipper end. Now you can take your wrapped zipper end and just make sure it's right side up and just push it into that zipper end, just like that. All right, now grab your tiny screw and we'll just screw this in. I'm using an eyeglass screwdriver to put this in, and just screw it in through the zipper. And there you go. Now you have your top zipper ready to be put on your bag. So grab your lining interior and grab your zipper. We want the zipper to be, when it's closed, on the same end as our other zippers. So you can see I have both my other zippers on the left side, so this will be on the left side. Now just pin your zipper enclosure raw edge to the raw edge top of your lining and just center it. You can eyeball this and clip it in place. Do it on the other side as well. All right, so this should be what you have right now. We're gonna go ahead and base stitch this zipper enclosure on at 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, this should be the interior of your bag now. Now we're on to final assembly. So grab your bag exterior and your interior. Open up your interior and we're gonna put the exterior on the inside of the interior. You can see you have 2 compartments, one with a zipper that's on the inside of the lining that has a hole on the bottom, and one that does not have that. You're gonna put your exterior right side out into the compartment that has the recessed zipper, and it's gonna be a tight squeeze, but you're gonna have to just kind of shove it in there. Don't worry, we'll flip it all out and press it in the end. Now, line up the sides first. So you have your 2 lining gussets. The outer portions of each of those is the side. So line that up with the exterior gusset. And if your exterior gusset is just a little tall, you can go ahead and trim that down just like this. So let's line up these seams. This is why it was important we backstitch so much when we were attaching everything together, because we're really going to be tugging at all of these seams during this step. Go. Now pin the other side panels together. Again, I'm going to kind of clip off this excess I have up here. Your zipper end should also be tucked inside between the lining and the exterior. Just line up the side of your gusset on the lining and the sides of your exterior gusset. Also make sure that the side that has the flap is lined up with the same side that has the zipper pocket. So the flap should be right up against the zipper pocket, but tuck that in between the lining and the exterior. Now just go ahead and clip along your edges, lining them up just like this. This is going to take a little bit of hand strength because the exterior portion with the foam is going to fight you a little bit. Just do your best. Stretch your fingers. All right, now do the other side as well. Again, you have your other compartment that doesn't have anything in it, and we're just lining up our top of our exterior with the top of the lining, clipping it together. Now we're going to sew along this edge at 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you have any sort of an extension table on your sewing machine, I suggest taking it off. It'll be a little bit easier to sew without that flat surface. So remember, we're doing 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew with the back of the exterior side up, and you're going to have to use some hand muscles here because it's going to fight you. Take it nice and slow, especially once you get to those sides with the gussets. Once you get to those gusset sides, make sure you just kind of rotate the whole bag up so you're not pulling too hard in any one direction. Moment of truth, you're going to turn the whole bag out through that recessed zipper pocket. Just gently pull the whole bag through that pocket. Now use that hole in the pocket to push out all of your corners. Push in your lining really well. This is cute. All right, make sure everything is as it should be. Okay, now we're gonna close this hole. What you can do is just remember you made that crease with your iron. You can just kind of re-pinch that down with some clips and then take the other side to meet that and just include the other side in those clips. All right, now we can just take this to the sewing machine. I'm just gonna top stitch along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now your bag is pretty much done. We just want to give it a good top stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch around the sides. When we top stitch around the front and the back, if you have these zipper enclosures, you're going to top stitch those down. So you can use some clips so you don't forget. But the zipper enclosures will be part of the top stitch. Make sure you tuck your zipper out of the way. You don't need to top stitch the end of your zipper. All right, once you have it all clipped, let's just go take this to the machine and do a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance top stitch. Your bag is just about done. If you use magnetic clasps, then your bag is done. If you used a twist lock like me, then you're kind of on the hardest step now. Now, attaching the female end of the twist lock I found to be very challenging. So we're gonna try something else. So the female end of your twist lock is going to be 1 inch up in your stripe. So go ahead and just mark a small 1 inch line right here. We're gonna cut this out, so don't even worry about it. Take the back piece of your twist lock, and that should have the holes and the oval, and line it up over that mark. I like mine to be a little bit further down, so I'm gonna do it like that. So now what you do is you're gonna trace that oval and the holes for the screws. Something like that. Now, I spent quite a bit of time trying to cut this hole out unsuccessfully. So today we're going to try using our cam snap rivet press to help us cut the holes. So I'm grabbing the hole punch die of my rivet press, and I'm going to just kind of keep punching holes in this oval here and in the small circles on the side, to see if I can use that instead. So you need it to be big enough to be able to put the inside of the front through that hole. And as you can see right now, mine is not. It should be snug, but it should still fit. So I'm just gonna keep punching out holes around like that. All right, let's do the holes for the screws as well. So I'm going to grab my back piece and some screws, and I just do 1 screw at a time. All right, I have 1 screw attached. I have no solid advice for how to do this. Honestly, I would just choose a different type of closure next time. Once you have your twist lock attached, it should look just like this. And there you go. So your bag unit is completely done. All we have to do now is make the strap. So grab your strap, and we're gonna lay the strap ends right sides together and clip in place along the short edge. Go ahead and sew these together at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Now you can go ahead and just press open that seam to reduce bulk. Now you're going to mark a midpoint line along the entire edge of your strap. On your short edges, just fold those in a 1/2 inch and press or clip them in place. Do the same on the other short edge. Now fold the long edges of your strap up to meet that middle line. And when you do this, make sure the folded short edges stay folded. And since I'm using vinyl, I'm just going to clip along this entire strip. And then once you do that, you'll fold the other edge down as well to meet it. All right, once you have it all folded, you just fold the whole thing in half one more time. So now you have a skinny strip that has no raw edges showing. Now we're going to top stitch along all 4 edges, including the short edges, at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Your strap should look something like this now. Let's go ahead and add the hardware. Grab your slider and slide one end up and over that middle bar. If you're using vinyl, this might be a very tight fit. So I leave about 1.5 inches extra on the strap here. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew 2 lines, one right against that middle bar and one about 1/2 inch down from it. If you want, you can leave it at that, but I'm gonna also add some rivets to this. It's easier to do this if you have a zipper foot on. I'm just gonna go down enough to include most of the end of my strap. All right, now if you want, you can go ahead and add some rivets to this. All right, now grab one of your swivel hooks and install it on the strap. When you're installing your swivel hook on the strap, you should install it upside down compared to where the slider is. Now take the end of your strap that doesn't have any hardware on it and make sure you have everything nice and straight. Slide it over the slider and down through the opposite end, just like that. So you should have something like this now with your swivel hook on one end, your slider here, and then your other edge with nothing on it on the other end. Grab your other swivel hook and just thread that onto that open end, just like this, and then you're gonna fold it down. I fold it down about 1.5 inches. You can clip it to keep it in place. So this should be your setup. You have a swivel hook ready to be sewn on one end, your slider in the middle, and then your other swivel hook on the other end. Now let's go to the sewing machine and just sew a couple of lines across the end of this strap to hold the swivel hook in place. Get as close as you can to that bar without actually hitting it. All right, and just to finish this up, we're gonna add a couple more rivets. And there you go, your strap is now complete. All right, are you ready to see it? It's super cute, ready? Da, 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 da. Right? Look at how beautiful. Oh, I love that little peak of the stripe on the top. This bag is so pretty. All right, so let's just take a peek on the inside. Here we go. We have our beautiful little snap block here. Open it up. We have our zipper up top. Remember, we have that beautiful little zipper end over there. So we have our zipper up top. Open it up. Pocket inside, pocket. I love this bag. I seriously love this bag. Like, this is the type of bag you replace your everyday bag with. You got an everyday store-bought bag? Not anymore. This is your everyday bag now. Look how beautiful it is. And it's not an easy bag. It's not a beginner bag, but I make a lot of mistakes. Can you tell? Can you tell? No, you can't. So this bag is one of those ones where you're probably going to make some mistakes, but it's very forgiving. You're probably never going to even notice it. It is just so, let me try it on real quick. So you can see if I hold it like that, it kind of matches my shirt. I probably picked the wrong shirt for this fabric, but you can see it just goes across your body like that really well. All right. So this was a super fun bag to make. I hope you make the Serin bag by Bagstock Designs. Thank you, Bagstock, for having such an amazing pattern and allowing me to film these tutorials for it. This is a keeper bag. Before we go, I just wanted to give a quick shout out because next week I'm going to have my first sponsored video. It's a sponsored video by Ana Luisa Jewelry. This little package right here came in the mail for me, and I will be opening it with you on the video while I'm also teaching you how to make a super cute little pouch that you can store your jewelry in when you're traveling. So I'm very excited about this. I'll be honest, I already took a little sneak peek and it's really, really cute. So I'm excited to share that with you guys. I hope that this tutorial inspired you to make a Serin bag. I hope you love this pattern as much as I do because it is truly a beautiful bag. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider clicking subscribe down below. Any questions you have, leave them in the comment section down below. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye!